Success had taught Chuck Hulbert many things, but it had never taught him how to fill the emptiness that money couldn't buy. The marble floors of Mercy General Hospital echoed beneath Chuck's Italian leather shoes as he approached the administrative wing. His tailored charcoal suit commanded respectful nods from passing staff, though none suspected the personal significance of today's visit. The check in his breast pocket, $2 million for the children's cancer ward, carried weight far beyond its monetary value. This annual pilgrimage had become Chuck's ritual for 5 years running, always on March 15th, the anniversary of her disappearance. The day Nesha had vanished without explanation, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a love that time couldn't diminish. He never explained his choice of charity or date to anyone, nor why his gaze constantly swept the corridors as if searching for ghosts. "Mr. Hulbert, what an honor to have you here again." The hospital's chief administrator greeted him with a warm smile. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes held the kind of wisdom that came from decades of witnessing both miracles and tragedies. "The honor is mine, Doctor. How are the children doing this year?" Chuck's voice carried genuine concern, though his attention seemed divided, his gaze occasionally drifting toward the busy hallways. "Better than ever, thanks to your continued support. The new treatment wing you funded last year has already saved dozens of lives. Would you like to see it?" Chuck nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. As they walked through the hospital's corridors, he noticed the subtle changes: new artwork on the walls, updated equipment, faces he didn't recognize among the staff. Life moved forward here, constantly renewing itself, unlike the static grief he carried in his heart. They passed through the pediatric ward, where children with bald heads and bright smiles waved at them through open doorways. Chuck waved back, his expression softening. These children reminded him of dreams he'd once had, dreams of a family, of little voices calling him daddy, of bedtime stories and scraped knees that needed kissing better. "Mr. Hulbert, I hate to interrupt." A nurse approached them breathlessly, her scrubs wrinkled and her face flushed with urgency. "But we have an emergency situation. There's a patient in critical condition who needs an immediate blood transfusion. The problem is, she has AB negative blood type, and our reserves are completely depleted." Chuck's heart skipped a beat. A B negative, the same rare blood type he carried. Only 1% of the population shared this genetic marker, making it both a blessing and a responsibility he'd never taken lightly. "I have AB negative blood," Chuck said without hesitation. "How much do you need?" The nurse's eyes widened with relief. "Sir, you could literally save her life. The patient is a young woman, probably in her late 20s, and she's been fighting a rare form of leukemia. Without this transfusion—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Chuck was already rolling up his sleeve. "Where do I need to go?" Dr. Chen placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Chuck, are you sure? This is above and beyond any donation we could ever ask for." "Some things are more important than money," he replied quietly, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. The blood donation center was a small, sterile room filled with reclining chairs and the soft hum of medical equipment. Chuck had given blood before, but never under such urgent circumstances. As the needle pierced his vein, he found himself thinking about the woman whose life hung in the balance. Who was she? Did she have family waiting for her? Children who needed their mother to come home? 20 minutes later, Chuck felt slightly lightheaded but profoundly satisfied as medical staff rushed his blood to the critical patient. A nurse offered standard post-donation refreshments, but Chuck's thoughts had already shifted elsewhere. This situation felt different, more personal than his usual charitable acts. "Would you like updates on the patient's condition?" the nurse asked gently. "Many donors appreciate follow-ups." Chuck nodded, uncertain why this particular case mattered so deeply. Perhaps the urgency had affected him, or maybe knowing his blood now flowed through someone else's veins created an invisible bond between strangers. Walking toward the ICU, Chuck noticed a small figure alone in the waiting area. A young boy, perhaps 5 years old, sat reading with dark curly hair and remarkably intelligent eyes. His book seemed far too advanced for his age, yet he read with genuine comprehension, occasionally glancing toward the ICU doors with worry no child should carry. "Is that boy alone?" Chuck asked the nurse. "That's Jason. He's been here for hours, waiting for news about his mother. Such a bright little boy, but he's been through so much already." Chuck felt his heart constrict. This child was waiting for the same woman who had just received his blood, the woman whose life had been hanging by a thread just moments ago. Without thinking, Chuck approached the boy. "Hello there," Chuck said softly, crouching down to the boy's level. "I'm Chuck. What's your name?" The boy looked up with eyes that held wisdom beyond his years. "I'm Jason. Are you a doctor?" "No, I'm not a doctor, but I'm here to help your mom. What are you reading?" Jason held up the book, a collection of advanced mathematics problems that would challenge most teenagers. "Mom taught me numbers. She says they're like puzzles, and when you solve them, you understand how the world works." Chuck was amazed. This 5-year-old was not only reading complex mathematical concepts, but seemed to understand them. "Your mom sounds very smart." "She is," Jason said with quiet pride. "She's the smartest person I know. She takes care of me all by herself, and she works really hard, even when she's tired." There was something about Jason that struck Chuck as familiar, though he couldn't place what it was. The boy's mannerisms, the way he tilted his head when thinking, even the shape of his hands as he turned the pages, it all seemed oddly recognizable. "Has your mom been sick for a long time?" Chuck asked gently. Jason nodded gravely. "She tries to hide it, but I know. She gets really tired sometimes and she has to go to the doctor a lot. But she always makes sure I'm okay first." The nurse approached them quietly. "The transfusion is complete. The patient is stable now, and the doctors are optimistic about her response to the treatment." Chuck felt a wave of relief wash over him. His blood had helped save this boy's mother. Jason's face lit up with the first genuine smile Chuck had seen from him. "Can I see her?" Jason asked eagerly. "In a little while, sweetheart. She's sleeping now, but she's going to be okay." As they walked toward the ICU viewing area, Chuck felt a strange anticipation building in his chest. He told himself it was just concern for a fellow human being, but something deeper was stirring, a feeling he couldn't quite name. The ICU was a maze of monitors and machines, each one beeping and humming with the rhythm of life support. Chuck followed Jason and the nurse to a particular room where they could see the patient through a large window. Chuck's world stopped. There, lying in the hospital bed with tubes and wires surrounding her, was the woman he had loved more than life itself. The woman who had disappeared from his world 5 years ago without explanation. The woman whose memory had haunted every success and every lonely night since. Nesha Solomon. His legs felt weak, and his heart pounded so hard he was certain everyone could hear it. She looked thinner than he remembered, her beautiful dark skin paled from illness, but it was unmistakably her. The same delicate features, the same graceful hands, the same peaceful expression she wore when sleeping. Chuck's mind raced with 1,000 questions, but one thought overwhelmed all others. The boy standing beside him, this incredibly intelligent 5-year-old who had been waiting so patiently for his mother. Jason. Chuck looked down at the child with new eyes, seeing similarities he had been too shocked to notice before. The boy's facial structure, his eye shape, even the way he stood with one shoulder slightly higher than the other, just like Chuck had always done. 5 years ago, Nesha had vanished. 5 years later, here was Jason, The math was devastatingly simple. Chapter 2. The Unexpected Reunion. Time has a cruel way of freezing the most important moments, trapping them in amber while the world spins relentlessly forward. Chuck stood motionless before the ICU window, his breath fogging the glass as he stared at the woman who had once been his entire universe. 5 years of searching, hiring investigators, chasing false leads, and here she lay, fighting for her life mere feet away. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. His blood was now keeping her alive. "That's my mom," Jason said softly, pressing his small hand against the cool glass. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" Chuck could barely find his voice. "Yes, very beautiful." The words hit him like a physical blow. My mom. This extraordinary child with his premature wisdom was Nisha's son. And if Chuck's growing suspicions proved correct, Jason was also his son, a son he'd never known existed. "She looks peaceful now," Jason continued, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had watched his mother suffer for far too long. "Usually she tries to hide when she's hurting, but I can always tell. She gets this little line between her eyebrows when she's in pain." Chuck looked more closely at Nesha's face and saw exactly what Jason described. A tiny furrow between her brows, even in sleep. How had this child learned to read such subtle signs? How long had he been taking care of his mother instead of the other way around? "Jason, how long has your mom been sick?" Chuck asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Since before I can remember," Jason replied matter-of-factly. "But she got really bad about 2 years ago. That's when she started falling asleep a lot during the day, and sometimes she'd forget things. But she never forgets the important stuff, like my birthday or when I have a test at school." Chuck's heart clenched. Nesha had been battling this disease for years, possibly since Jason was born. Had she known she was sick when she left him? Had she been trying to protect him from this reality? "Do you live here in the city?" Chuck asked carefully. "We live in the apartment above Mrs. Rodriguez's bakery on Maple Street. Mom works there sometimes when she feels good enough. Mrs. Rodriguez is really nice. She watches me when Mom has to go to the doctor." Maple Street. Chuck knew the area well. It was a working-class neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown, where families struggled to make ends meet, but looked out for each other. The thought of Nesha working in a bakery while fighting cancer, raising a child alone, made Chuck's chest tight with emotion. "What kind of work does your mom do?" Chuck asked. "She's really smart with numbers like me. She helps people with their taxes and stuff. She does it from home mostly, on her computer. She taught me how to add and subtract when I was 3, and now I can do multiplication and division too. She says I'm going to be a mathematician someday." Chuck's breath caught. Nesha had always been gifted with mathematics. It was one of the things that had drawn them together in college. They had spent countless hours studying together, challenging each other with complex problems. She had been pursuing a master's degree in applied mathematics when she disappeared. "Your mom taught you all that?" "Uh-huh. She says education is the most important thing because nobody can ever take it away from you. She makes sure I read every day, even when she's too tired to read with me. Sometimes I read to her instead." The image of this 5-year-old reading to his sick mother brought tears to Chuck's eyes. What kind of strength did it take for a child to be so mature, so understanding of a situation that would overwhelm most adults? "Jason, do you have any other family? Grandparents, uncles, aunts?" Jason shook his head. "It's just me and Mom. She says sometimes families are small, but that makes them extra special because you love each other more." Chuck felt a surge of anger, not at Nesha, but at the circumstances that had kept him from this child's life. If Jason was his son, then this boy had been facing his mother's illness alone, without the support of a father, without the financial resources that Chuck could have provided. Mr. Chuck. Jason looked up at him with those incredibly intelligent eyes. Why did you help my mom? The nurse said you gave her your blood. Chuck crouched down to Jason's level again. Because when someone needs help, and you have the ability to help them, it's the right thing to do. Your mom needed something I could give her. Are you an angel? Jason asked seriously. Mom told me that angels sometimes look like regular people, but they show up when you need them most. The question hit Chuck like a lightning bolt. I'm not an angel, Jason. I'm just a man who wanted to help. But you showed up right when Mom needed you most. That sounds like angel stuff to me. Chuck studied Jason's face more carefully, searching for familiar features. The boy's nose belonged unmistakably to Nesha, but his chin bore a cleft Chuck recognized from his own reflection. Jason's hands were long and slender, perfect for piano, just like Chuck's. Even his posture, weight shifted slightly to the left foot, mirrored Chuck's unconscious stance. Jason, may I ask you something? Sure. Do you know anything about your father? Jason's expression became guarded, displaying maturity beyond his years. Mom says he was a good man who lived far away and didn't know about me. She says maybe someday I'll meet him, but for now it's just me and her, and that's okay. The words struck Chuck like lightning. Nesha had protected them both, shielding Chuck from the burden of her illness while protecting Jason from feeling rejected or unwanted. Your mom sounds very wise. She is. She always knows what to say to make me feel better. Even when she's really sick, she still takes care of me. A doctor emerged from Nesha's room, and Chuck's attention immediately shifted. The physician was a tall, serious-looking man with graying temples and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Are you family? The doctor asked, looking between Chuck and Jason. This is Jason, the patient's son, Chuck said carefully. I'm the blood donor. The doctor's expression softened as he looked at Jason. Your mom is doing much better, little man. The transfusion was successful, and her vital signs are stabilizing. She's not out of the woods yet, but this is a very good sign. When can I see her? Jason asked. She's still sleeping from the medication, but maybe in a few hours. The important thing is that she's responding well to the treatment. Chuck felt overwhelming relief. His blood had helped save her life. But now what? How could he walk away from this situation? How could he leave Jason sitting alone in this waiting room, worrying about his mother? Doctor, what's her long-term prognosis? Chuck asked. That's difficult to say. She has a rare form of leukemia that's been progressing for several years. She's been receiving treatment, but... The doctor glanced at Jason and chose his words carefully. She needs consistent, aggressive treatment to have the best chance at recovery. Chuck understood the subtext. Nesha needed expensive treatment that she probably couldn't afford. She had been fighting this battle alone, without resources, while trying to raise a child. I'd like to help with her medical expenses, Chuck said quietly. The doctor looked surprised. That's very generous, Mr. Holbert. Chuck Holbert. Mr. Holbert, are you sure? Treatment for this condition can be extremely expensive. Money isn't an issue. I want to make sure she gets the best possible care. Jason looked up at Chuck with wonder. You really are an angel, aren't you? Chuck knelt down and looked into Jason's eyes that he was now certain were a mirror of his own. I'm just someone who cares about you and your mom very much. As Chuck said the words, he realized they were truer than he had ever imagined. In the span of an hour, his entire world had been turned upside down. He had found the woman he had never stopped loving, and possibly discovered he was a father. The three of them stood together in the ICU hallway, a successful businessman, a brilliant 5-year-old, and between them, separated by glass and machines, the woman who connected their lives in ways that none of them fully understood yet. Chuck made a silent promise as he watched Nesha's chest rise and fall with each breath. Whatever it took, however long it took, he would be there for both of them. He had lost 5 years, but he wouldn't lose another day. The boy beside him was living proof that love could create miracles even in the darkest circumstances. And Chuck was determined to be the miracle that Jason and Nesha needed now. Chapter 3. Painful Memories. Love stories are written in moments, but they're shattered by the silence between words where everything goes unsaid. Chuck sat in the hospital cafeteria at 3 in the morning, nursing his 3rd cup of cold coffee while Jason slept peacefully across from him, small head pillowed on Chuck's suit jacket. The boy had refused to leave the hospital, and Chuck couldn't bear abandoning either of them. Every few minutes his gaze drifted toward the elevators, toward the ICU where Nesha fought for her life, with his blood sustaining her. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that seemed to mirror the fragmented memories Chuck had been reconstructing for hours. 5 years of wondering, searching, and ultimately accepting that his greatest love had simply vanished. Now, sitting beside what he was certain was his son, Chuck forced himself to relive those final agonizing weeks with Nesha. Northwestern University, spring semester, senior year. They had been inseparable for 3 years, the couple everyone envied. Chuck, the ambitious business major dreaming of empire building, and Nesha, the brilliant mathematics student who solved complex equations mentally while others struggled with calculators. They studied together, laughed together, planned their future together. Chuck had already purchased an engagement ring, hidden in his dorm room, waiting for the perfect post-graduation moment. "I'm scared about what comes next," Nesha had whispered one night, lying against his chest in his narrow dorm bed, fingers tracing patterns on his skin. "What do you mean?" Chuck had asked, stroking her hair. "We've planned everything. I'll start at Morrison and Associates. You'll begin your master's program, and we'll get that apartment near campus." "But what if things change? What if we change?" Chuck had lifted her chin to meet his gaze. "Nesha, we're not changing. What we have is forever. I love you more than anything." She'd smiled then, but Chuck now recognized something he'd missed, a sadness in her eyes that contradicted her expression. "I love you too, Chuck, more than you'll ever know." 2 weeks before graduation. Nesha had been acting strange, distant in a way that Chuck couldn't understand. She would disappear for hours, claiming she had to meet with her advisor or handle graduation paperwork. She had stopped eating regularly, and Chuck had noticed she looked pale, almost fragile. "Are you feeling okay?" he had asked one evening as they sat in the library, supposedly studying for finals. "I'm fine," she had replied, but her voice lacked its usual warmth. "Just tired. Graduation stress, you know." Chuck had accepted the explanation because he wanted to believe it. He was busy too, interviewing for jobs, preparing for the future he had mapped out for both of them. He had been so focused on their plans that he had missed the signs that something was seriously wrong. The night before graduation, Chuck had suggested they go to their favorite restaurant, the little Italian place where they had had their first official date. He had been planning to propose that night, to give Nesha the ring and officially ask her to be his wife. They would graduate together, get engaged, and start their lives as a team. But Nesha had been quiet throughout dinner, barely touching her food. Her hands had trembled slightly when she reached for her water glass, and Chuck had noticed dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Nesha, what's wrong? And don't tell me it's nothing. I know you better than that." She had looked at him with those beautiful dark eyes, and Chuck had seen something there that terrified him, a look of someone saying goodbye. "Chuck, I need to tell you something important, but first, I need you to promise me that you'll listen to everything I have to say before you respond." Chuck's heart had started racing. "You're scaring me. What's going on? Promise me." "I promise." Nesha had taken a deep breath, and Chuck had prepared himself for whatever she was about to say. Maybe she had gotten into a graduate program in another city. Maybe she was having second thoughts about their relationship. Maybe she needed space. He had been ready for any of those conversations. He had not been ready for what came next. "I'm pregnant." The words had hit Chuck like a physical blow. Pregnant. They had been careful but not perfect. These things happened. His mind had immediately started calculating. They could move up the timeline, get married sooner, adjust their plans. It would be challenging, but they could make it work. "Okay," Chuck had said slowly. "Okay, we can handle this. We'll get married this summer instead of waiting. I'll take the job in Chicago. You can transfer your graduate program." "Chuck, stop." Nesha's voice had been barely above a whisper. "There's more." "More? I'm sick, Chuck. Really sick. I've been going to doctors for weeks, trying to figure out why I've been so tired, why I've been losing weight. They ran tests and—" Her voice had broken. "I have leukemia." The restaurant had seemed to spin around Chuck. Leukemia. Cancer. The word had crashed into his consciousness like a wrecking ball, destroying every plan, every dream, every assumption about their future. "What does that mean? What kind of treatment do you need? We'll get the best doctors, the best hospitals." "Chuck, you're not listening. I'm pregnant and I have cancer. The treatments could hurt the baby. And even if they don't, even if I can carry the baby to term, I might not—" She had stopped, unable to say the words. Chuck had reached across the table, taking her hands in his. "We'll figure it out. Whatever it takes, we'll get through this together." But Nesha had pulled her hands away. "No, Chuck. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You're already trying to fix everything, trying to rescue me. But some things can't be fixed." "That's not true. Medicine is advancing every day. People beat cancer all the time. And what if I don't? What if I spend the next 2 years fighting this disease, and you spend the next 2 years watching me die? What about your career, your dreams, your life? My life is with you. That's all that matters." Nesha had started crying then, tears streaming down her cheeks. "That's exactly why I can't do this to you. You have so much potential, so much to offer the world. I won't let you sacrifice everything for a future that might not exist." "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that after graduation, I'm going home to my aunt in Detroit. I'm going to have the baby, and I'm going to fight this disease. But I'm going to do it alone." Chuck had felt his world crumbling. "That's insane. You can't just decide to cut me out of this. It's my baby too." "Is it?" Nesha had looked at him with heartbreaking sadness. "Chuck, you're 22 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. You shouldn't have to choose between your future and a sick girlfriend who might not survive the year. That's not your decision to make." "Yes, it is. It's my life, my illness, my choice, and I choose to let you go." Chuck had argued, pleaded, reasoned with her for hours. But Nesha had been resolute. She had made up her mind, and nothing Chuck said could change it. Graduation day. Chuck had looked for her everywhere, in the crowd of graduates, among the families in the audience, in every face he passed. But Nesha Solomon was nowhere to be found. She had vanished as completely as if she had never existed. Chuck had spent the next 3 years hiring private investigators, following every lead, checking every hospital and clinic in Detroit and beyond. He had never found a trace of her. Eventually, he had been forced to accept that she was gone, that she had meant what she said about disappearing from his life. Present day. Now, sitting in this hospital cafeteria, Chuck understood what had happened. Nesha had kept her word. She had gone away to have the baby, their baby, and she had fought her disease alone. Jason was proof that she had survived at least long enough to raise an extraordinary child, but clearly the battle was far from over. Chuck looked at Jason sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling with each breath. This beautiful, brilliant boy was his son. His son, who had been living in poverty, watching his mother slowly die, believing his father didn't know he existed. The guilt was overwhelming. While Chuck had been building his business empire, accumulating wealth and success, his son had been growing up without a father. Nesha had been raising Jason alone, working whatever jobs she could manage while battling cancer, never once reaching out for help. Chuck understood her reasoning now. She had been trying to protect him from exactly this kind of pain. But in doing so, she had denied Jason the chance to know his father, and she had denied Chuck the chance to be there for both of them when they needed him most. A nurse approached their table quietly. "Mr. Halbert, the patient is awake. She's asking about her son." Chuck's heart pounded. Nesha was awake. After 5 years of wondering, of searching, of grieving, he was about to face the woman who had broken his heart to save his life. He gently shook Jason's shoulder. "Jason, buddy, your mom is awake." Jason sat up immediately, fully alert, despite having been sound asleep moments before. "She is? Can I see her?" "Yes, you can see her." As they walked toward the elevator, Chuck wondered what he would say to Nesha. How do you begin a conversation with someone who vanished from your life to protect you from theirs? How do you explain 5 years of questions in the space of a hospital room? But more importantly, how do you tell the woman you never stopped loving that you finally understand why she left, and that you're not going anywhere this time? The elevator doors opened, and Chuck took Jason's hand as they stepped inside. In a few minutes, he would see Nesha's eyes open for the first time in 5 years, and this time he would be ready for whatever came next. Chapter 4. The Truth Unfolds. Sometimes the bravest thing a child can do is speak the truth that adults are too frightened to acknowledge. Jason stood beside his mother's hospital bed with composure that belonged to someone 3 times his age, small hand gently clasping Nesha's while machines maintained their rhythmic vigil over her vital signs. Chuck remained in the doorway, watching the reunion between mother and son, his heart simultaneously breaking and healing at witnessing them together. "Hi, Mama," Jason whispered, his voice carrying all the love and fear he'd contained for hours. "I was so scared." Nesha's eyes fluttered open, still clouded by medication, but immediately focusing on her son's face. "Hey, my brilliant boy, I'm okay. I'm right here." Her voice was weak but suffused with the warmth Chuck remembered so vividly. "The nice man gave you his blood to make you better," Jason said matter-of-factly. "I told him you were the smartest person I know and that you take care of me all by yourself." Chuck watched Nesha's gaze shift from Jason to where he stood in the doorway. When their eyes met, the world seemed to halt. 5 years of separation, unanswered questions, and lost time compressed into a single look that conveyed everything and nothing simultaneously. Nesha's face went through a series of emotions so quickly that Chuck could barely process them: shock, disbelief, fear, love, and finally, resignation. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. "Mama, this is Mr. Chuck," Jason continued, oblivious to the charged atmosphere between the 2 adults. "He's the one who helped you. I think he might be an angel." Chuck stepped into the room slowly, his hands trembling despite his efforts to appear calm. "Hello, Nesha." "Chuck." His name was barely a whisper on her lips. Why are you here?" "I was making a donation to the hospital when they needed a blood donor. A B negative." Chuck's voice was steady, but his eyes never left her face. "I had no idea it was you." Nesha closed her eyes, and Chuck saw tears beginning to form. "Of all the hospitals, of all the days, Mama, do you know Mr. Chuck?" Jason asked, his intelligent eyes moving between his mother and Chuck with growing curiosity. Nesha opened her eyes and looked at her son with an expression of profound sadness and love. Jason, honey, Mr. Chuck and I, we knew each other a long time ago, before you were born. Really? That's so cool. Were you friends? Chuck felt his throat constrict at the innocence of the question. Yes, Jason. Your mom and I were very good friends. Jason beamed with the enthusiasm of a child who had discovered an unexpected connection. That's why you wanted to help her, because you were friends. I knew you were special. The simple logic of a 5-year-old's mind cut through all the complex emotions swirling in the room. Chuck found himself smiling despite the gravity of the situation. You're right, Jason. Your mom is very special to me. Nesha squeezed Jason's hand gently. Sweetheart, could you do me a favor? Could you go ask the nurse for some ice chips? My throat is very dry. Jason nodded eagerly, always happy to help his mother. I'll be right back, Mama. Don't go anywhere. I promise I'm not going anywhere. As soon as Jason left the room, the carefully maintained calm shattered. Nesha turned to Chuck with tears streaming down her face. You shouldn't be here, she whispered urgently. Please, Chuck, just go. Pretend you never saw me. Are you insane? Chuck moved closer to her bed, his voice low but intense. Nesha, that's my son, isn't it? Jason is my son. Nesha's silence was answer enough. 5 years, Nesha. 5 years I've been looking for you. 5 years wondering if you were alive or dead. 5 years wondering what I did wrong to make you disappear. You didn't do anything wrong. That's the point. Nesha's voice was stronger now, despite her physical weakness. Chuck, look at you. Look at what you've become. You're successful. You're wealthy. You have everything you dreamed of. If you had stayed, we would have faced this together, like partners, like the team we were supposed to be. You would have sacrificed everything for me, your career, your future, your dreams. I couldn't let you do that. Chuck pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down, leaning forward so their faces were inches apart. That wasn't your decision to make alone. You took away my choice, Nesha. You took away my right to be a father to my son. I was trying to protect you both. From what? From loving each other. From being a family. Nesha's composure finally cracked completely. From watching me die, Chuck. From Jason growing up with a father who resented being tied to a sick woman. From you throwing away everything you worked for to take care of people who might not even survive. And how did that work out? Chuck's voice was gentle but firm. Look where we are, Nesha. You're sick. You're struggling financially. And Jason has been taking care of you instead of being a normal 5-year-old kid. Meanwhile, I've spent 5 years with more money than I could ever spend and a hole in my heart that nothing could fill. The room fell silent, except for the steady beeping of monitors. Nesha stared at Chuck, seeing him clearly for the first time since waking up. Tell me about him, Chuck said softly. Tell me about Jason. Despite everything, Nesha's face lit up with pride. He's extraordinary, Chuck. He started reading when he was 3. He can do math problems that most middle schoolers can't handle. He's kind and thoughtful and so mature it sometimes breaks my heart. He's been taking care of you. I tried not to let him, but he's too smart. He figured out I was sick before I could hide it from him. Instead of being scared, he just adapted. He learned to cook simple meals, to remind me about my medications, to call Mrs. Rodriguez when I wasn't feeling well. Chuck's heart ached imagining this brilliant child shouldering such adult responsibilities. What have you told him about me? That his father was a good man who lived far away and didn't know about him. That maybe someday he would meet you, but for now it was just the two of us. Nesha's voice broke. I never wanted him to feel abandoned or unwanted. He asked me today if I was an angel, Chuck said quietly. He said angels sometimes look like regular people but show up when you need them most. Nesha smiled through her tears. That sounds like something he would say. He has such a beautiful way of seeing the world. Nesha, I want to know him. I want to be his father, and I want to take care of both of you. Chuck, you don't understand. This isn't just about the cancer. I'm not the same person I was in college. I've been poor, I've been sick, I've made 1,000 compromises just to survive. I work in a bakery when I'm strong enough. I live in a tiny apartment above someone else's business. I shop at thrift stores and clip coupons. Your world and mine, they're completely different now. Money doesn't matter. It does when you don't have it. It matters when you're choosing between groceries and medication. It matters when your son outgrows his shoes and you have to wait until payday to replace them. Chuck felt a surge of anger, not at Nesha, but at the circumstances that had forced her into such situations. That ends now. Today, whatever you need, whatever Jason needs, whatever it costs to get you healthy, none of that is a problem anymore. I don't want your pity or your charity, Chuck. It's not charity, it's love, it's family. It's what should have happened 5 years ago if you had trusted me enough to let me choose my own life. Jason appeared in the doorway with a cup of ice chips, his face beaming with accomplishment. I got them, Mama. The nurse said you're doing really well and the blood transfusion was perfect. As Jason handed his mother the ice chips, Chuck noticed something that made his breath catch. Jason moved with a slight limp, favoring his left leg in a way that Chuck hadn't noticed before. Jason, does your leg hurt? Chuck asked gently. Jason looked down at his leg as if he had forgotten about it. Oh, this? It's okay. I fell off my bike a few weeks ago, but Mama couldn't take me to the doctor because she was too sick that day. Mrs. Rodriguez looked at it and said it was probably just bruised. Chuck and Nesha exchanged glances. The boy might have a fracture that had never been properly treated, another consequence of their financial struggles, another sign of how much Jason had endured in silence. Jason, Chuck said carefully, would it be okay if we had a doctor look at your leg while we're here at the hospital? If you think it would help, Jason replied, with the same matter-of-fact acceptance he showed toward everything else in his difficult young life. Chuck looked at Nesha, seeing the guilt and worry in her eyes. This was what poverty looked like, a brilliant child suffering in silence because medical care was a luxury his family couldn't afford. Nesha, Chuck said quietly, let me help. Not because I pity you, not because I'm trying to buy my way back into your life. Let me help because Jason is my son, and because I love you both. Let me help because it's what families do for each other. For the first time since waking up, Nesha looked directly into Chuck's eyes without trying to look away. What she saw there must have convinced her, because she nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered, but we need to tell him the truth. He deserves to know who you really are. Chuck's heart pounded as he looked at Jason, who was watching both adults with the intuitive understanding that something important was happening. Jason, Chuck said gently, your mom and I have something very important to tell you. Chapter 5. A Father's Love Awakens. The moment a man realizes he's a father is when his heart expands beyond the confines of his chest and his life divides into before and after. Jason stood perfectly still between Chuck's chair and his mother's hospital bed, intelligent eyes moving between the two adults as if solving the most crucial equation of his young life. The boy's intuition had already signaled something significant was happening. His remarkable mind simply waited for facts to align with instinct. Jason, Nesha began softly, reaching for her son's hand, do you remember when you asked me about your daddy? You said he was a good man who lived far away and didn't know about me, Jason replied with perfect recall. You said maybe someday I would meet him. Chuck's throat constricted. The simple trust in Jason's voice, The matter-of-fact way he repeated his mother's careful words revealed how skillfully Nesha had protected him from feeling abandoned or unwanted. "Well, sweetheart," Nesha continued, her voice trembling slightly, "it turns out that someday is today. Jason, this is Chuck Holbert. He's your father." Silence filled the room except for the steady rhythm of medical equipment. Jason studied Chuck with those extraordinary eyes, examining his face with the same intensity he brought to mathematics textbooks. Chuck held his breath, waiting for his son's reaction, terrified Jason might reject him or feel angry about their lost years. "I knew it," Jason said finally, his voice filled with wonder rather than anger. "I knew there was something special about you. You have the same hands as me, see?" Jason held up his small hand next to Chuck's larger one, comparing their long, slender fingers. "And you do that thing with your shoulder when you're thinking, just like I do." Chuck stared at their hands side by side, overwhelmed by the simple perfection of the moment. His son, his brilliant, brave, beautiful son, had noticed their similarities before the adults had worked up the courage to acknowledge them. "How do you feel about that, Jason?" Chuck asked, gently. "About me being your father?" Jason considered the question with the seriousness he brought to everything important. "I feel happy," he said simply, "and I feel sad that you didn't know about me for so long, but mostly I feel happy because now you're here and you helped save Mama's life." The pure acceptance in Jason's voice broke something open in Chuck's chest. This child had endured poverty, his mother's illness, and years without a father, yet his response to learning the truth was happiness rather than resentment. "I'm sorry I wasn't here before, Jason. If I had known about you, I would have been here from the very beginning." "I know," Jason said, with the confidence of someone who understood more about the world than he should at his age. "Mama explained that sometimes grown-ups have to make hard decisions to protect the people they love. She was protecting both of us." Chuck looked at Nesha with new appreciation for how she had handled an impossible situation. Despite her own struggles, she had made sure Jason never felt unloved or abandoned. "Can I ask you something, Dad?" Jason said, trying out the word for the first time. The word hit Chuck like lightning. Dad. His son was calling him Dad. "You can ask me anything, anytime." "Are you rich like the people on TV?" Chuck almost laughed at the directness of the question, but Jason's expression was serious. "Yes, Jason. I have a lot of money." "Good," Jason said with satisfaction. "Then you can make sure Mama gets the best doctors, and we don't have to worry about money anymore." The practical nature of Jason's response revealed how much financial stress the boy had been aware of, despite Nesha's efforts to shield him from it. This 5-year-old had been worrying about medical bills and basic necessities while other children his age were concerned with toys and cartoons. "That's exactly what I'm going to do," Chuck promised. "Your mama is going to get the best medical care in the world, and you're never going to have to worry about money again." "What about my leg?" Jason asked, unconsciously favoring his left side. "Mama said we couldn't afford to have it looked at, but it still hurts sometimes." Chuck's heart clenched. "We're going to have the doctors here examine your leg right now, and if anything is wrong, we'll fix it immediately." Jason nodded, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "Okay. Can I still live with Mama? I take care of her when she doesn't feel good." "Of course you'll stay with your mama, but from now on you get to be a little boy instead of taking care of everyone else. That's my job now. But I like taking care of Mama. It makes me feel important." Chuck knelt down so he was at Jason's eye level. "You are important, Jason. You're the most important person in the world to both of us. But you're also 5 years old, and 5-year-olds should get to play and learn and just be kids. Let me and the doctors take care of Mama's health, okay?" Jason considered this seriously. "Okay, but can I still help sometimes? I'm really good at remembering when she needs to take her medicine. You can help however you want to help. We're a team now. A team, Jason repeated, smiling for the first time since Chuck had met him. I like that. Chuck felt a rush of paternal love so intense, it nearly overwhelmed him. This extraordinary child had accepted him completely without conditions or reservations. Jason's capacity for love and forgiveness was staggering. Jason, Nesha said softly, could you go find the nurse and ask her to call a doctor to look at your leg? Tell her your daddy wants to make sure you're okay. Jason beamed at hearing Nesha refer to Chuck as his daddy. Okay, Mama, I'll be right back. He paused at the door and looked back at Chuck. Dad? After the doctor looks at my leg, can you tell me about what you do for work? And maybe about when you and Mama were in college together? I would love to tell you all of that, son. Jason disappeared down the hallway, and Chuck and Nesha were alone again. The weight of everything that had just happened settled between them. He's incredible, Chuck said, his voice filled with awe. Nesha, what you've done with him, how you've raised him, he's extraordinary. He's had to grow up too fast, Nesha replied, guilt evident in her voice. He's been more of a caretaker than a child. That ends now. I meant what I said. He gets to be a kid from now on. Chuck, this is all happening so fast. A few hours ago, you didn't even know he existed. Are you sure you're ready for this? Being a father is more than just paying for things. Chuck moved his chair closer to her bed. Nesha, I've been ready to be a father since the day you told me you were pregnant 5 years ago. I've been ready to take care of both of you since that night in the restaurant when you tried to push me away. The only thing I wasn't ready for was losing you. I was so scared, Nesha admitted. Scared of the cancer, scared of being a burden, scared of ruining your life. The only thing that ruined my life was losing you. I built a successful business. I made more money than I could ever spend, but none of it meant anything without you and Jason. I've been living half a life for 5 years. What happens now? Nesha asked quietly. I mean, practically speaking, Jason and I have a life in our neighborhood. He goes to school there, we have friends there. I don't know how to fit into your world. We'll figure it out together. Maybe that means I learn to fit into your world instead. Maybe it means we create a new world that works for all three of us. The details don't matter as much as the fact that we're going to face them as a family. Chuck, I'm still sick. The leukemia isn't gone. I might need months or years of treatment. I might not. Chuck reached over and took her hand. Then we'll fight it together. You'll have the best doctors, the best treatment, and you'll have Jason and me beside you every step of the way. No more fighting alone. I don't know if I remember how to let someone take care of me. Then I'll teach you, the same way you taught Jason mathematics and kindness, and how to be brave in impossible situations. Jason appeared in the doorway with a doctor, a young pediatric specialist who introduced herself and immediately began examining Jason's leg with gentle thoroughness. Chuck watched his son answer the doctor's questions with remarkable maturity, explaining exactly when the injury had occurred and how it had been feeling. It's a hairline fracture that's partially healed, the doctor explained after reviewing the x-rays. It would have been better to set it properly when it happened, but it's not serious. We can put him in a walking cast for a few weeks and it should heal completely. Will it hurt? Jason asked with scientific curiosity rather than fear. Not at all. In fact, it might feel better than it has been feeling. As the doctor fitted Jason with a small blue cast, Chuck marveled at his son's resilience. This child had been walking around on a fractured leg for weeks, never complaining, never making it anyone else's problem. Dad? Jason said as the doctor finished. Can I tell the kids at school that my dad is rich and he saved my mom's life? Chuck laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd had in years. You can tell them whatever you want, son. Cool. They're not going to believe it. Jason, Nesha said gently, we're probably going to be here at the hospital for a few more days while I get stronger. You could stay with Mrs. Rodriguez or... I want to stay here, Jason interrupted. I want to stay with you and Dad. Chuck felt his heart expand at hearing Jason call him Dad so naturally. I'll arrange for a family suite. We'll all stay together. Really? Jason's eyes lit up. We can all be together? Every day from now on, Chuck promised. As the evening settled around them, Chuck found himself sitting beside Nesha's bed while Jason slept peacefully in a chair nearby, his new cast propped up on a pillow. The boy was exhausted from the emotional and physical toll of the day, but he had insisted on staying close to both his parents. Look at him, Nesha whispered, watching Jason sleep. He's never looked so peaceful. Even when he sleeps, he usually looks worried about something. But tonight he knows he's safe, Chuck finished. He knows his family is together and that someone else is going to handle the grown-up worries for a while. I can't believe this is real. This morning I woke up feeling sicker than I had in months. And tonight, I'm looking at my son sleeping next to his father in a hospital room that probably costs more per night than I make in a month. This is real, Nesha. We're real. This family is real. And tomorrow, we start building the life we should have had 5 years ago. Nesha squeezed Chuck's hand. I love you. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. I love you too. Both of you. And I'm never letting either of you go again. Outside the hospital room, the world continued its relentless pace. But inside, time had slowed to the rhythm of 3 hearts, beating in sync for the first time. Chuck looked at his sleeping son and the woman he had never stopped loving, and realized that every success, every dollar, every achievement of the past 5 years had been leading to this moment. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. Chapter 6. The First Miracle. Miracles don't always announce themselves with thunder and lightning. Sometimes they whisper through steady monitor beeps and the soft rustle of hope returning to wounded hearts. 3 days had passed since Chuck's blood saved Nesha's life, and their hospital suite had transformed into something remarkably homelike. Jason had claimed the window seat as his study area, working through advanced mathematics workbooks. Nesha's color was slowly returning, though she still tired easily. Chuck had barely left the hospital, conducting business meetings via video conference. This morning felt different. There was energy in the room that hadn't existed before. Dad, Jason said, looking up from his workbook. Mama looks different today. Better different. Chuck observed Nesha carefully. Jason was right. There was clarity in her eyes that had been missing. You're very observant, son. Numbers teach you to notice patterns, Jason replied seriously. And Mama is definitely following a better pattern today. Dr. Williams, the oncologist Chuck had flown in from Johns Hopkins, entered with her team. Chuck had assembled the best medical team money could buy, and Dr. Williams was renowned for her work with rare blood cancers. Good morning, family, Dr. Williams said warmly. How are we feeling today, Nesha? Stronger, Nesha replied, sitting up without the grimace of pain that had accompanied such movements just days before. Much stronger. That's what I hope to hear. We have your latest test results, and I have very encouraging news. Chuck felt his heart rate increase. Jason immediately closed his workbook and moved to stand beside his mother's bed. The blood transfusion from Chuck, combined with our treatment protocol, has had remarkable results. Your white blood cell count has stabilized, and we're seeing signs that your body is responding exceptionally well to the new chemotherapy regimen. What does that mean exactly? Chuck asked, hardly daring to hope. The cancer cells are being systematically eliminated. Nesha's body is fighting back in a way we haven't seen before. The combination of fresh, compatible blood and new medications has given her immune system the boost it needed. Jason looked up at his mother with shining eyes. You're getting better, Mama. Really better. It appears so, sweetheart, Nesha said, tears of relief streaming down her face. Dr. Williams continued, we're not talking about a complete cure yet, but remission is a very real possibility. With continued treatment and monitoring, there's every reason to be optimistic. Chuck felt overwhelming emotion crash over him. Relief, gratitude, joy, and love all simultaneously. The woman he loved was going to live. Jason was going to keep his mother. They were going to have a future together. There's more, Doctor, Williams added with a smile. Based on these results, Nesha will be strong enough to go home within the next few days. She'll need outpatient treatment, but the critical phase appears to be behind us. Home, Jason repeated thoughtfully. Which home? Our apartment or Dad's house? We'll figure that out together, Chuck said, ruffling Jason's hair. The important thing is that we'll be together. After the medical team left, the three of them sat in comfortable silence, absorbing the magnitude of what they had learned. Nesha was going to recover. The nightmare was finally ending. Chuck, Nesha said quietly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Anything. These doctors, this treatment, this hospital suite, I know it's costing a fortune. I need to know that you're doing this because you want to, not because you feel obligated. Chuck moved his chair closer to her bed. Nesha, do you remember what you said the night you told me you were pregnant and sick? I said a lot of things that night. You said you wouldn't let me sacrifice everything for a future that might not exist. Well, I didn't sacrifice anything for this. I invested everything in this. When you invest, you do it because you believe in the outcome. I believe in us, Nesha. I believe in our family. But the money is meaningless without you and Jason. I've spent 5 years accumulating wealth that brought me no joy because the people I wanted to share it with weren't there. This isn't charity. This is me finally being able to use my resources for what actually matters. Jason, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. Dad, can I ask you something about money? Of course. If you have so much money that paying for Mama's doctors isn't a problem, does that mean I can stop worrying about whether we have enough food and if our rent is paid? The question broke Chuck's heart. This brilliant 5-year-old had been carrying adult worries about basic survival. Jason, you never have to worry about food or rent or any of those things ever again. That's my job now. Good, Jason said with visible relief, because those worries were really hard math and I like the fun math better. Chuck and Nesha exchanged glances, both struck by their son's resilience and the weight he had been carrying without complaint. Speaking of math, Chuck said, I've been thinking about your education, Jason. You're working at a level far beyond what they can offer at your current school. I like my school, Jason said quickly. My teacher is really nice and she lets me help other kids with their math homework. I'm not saying we have to change schools right away, but maybe we could find additional programs for you. There are special classes for gifted children and universities that have programs for kids like you. Jason's eyes lit up. Really? There are other kids who like advanced math. Lots of them, and they have competitions and camps and activities for young mathematicians. That sounds amazing, but would I still be able to spend time with you and Mama? I don't want to be away from you guys. Chuck felt his heart swell with love for this remarkable child who was afraid of being separated from his parents, even for educational opportunities. Jason, we would never send you anywhere you didn't want to go. You're our family now, and families stick together. Forever. Forever. Nesha watched this exchange with wonder. In just a few days, Chuck had not only accepted being a father, but had embraced it completely, already thinking about Jason's future and making plans. Chuck, she said softly, what happens when I'm completely better? When this crisis is over and we're just a regular family dealing with regular problems, Are you sure you're ready for school pickups and homework help? Chuck considered the question seriously. Nesha, I've spent 5 years in boardrooms making million-dollar decisions, attending charity galas and networking events. Do you know what I thought about during every single one? What? How empty they felt without someone to share them with. School pickups and homework help sounds like the most wonderful life I could possibly imagine. Jason bounced excitedly. Dad, when Mama gets out of the hospital, can you help me build a tree house? I would love to help you build a tree house, son. This is going to be the best family ever, Jason declared with confidence. As the afternoon sun streamed through the hospital room windows, Chuck looked at Nesha and Jason and realized that Dr. Williams had been wrong about one thing. She had called Nesha's recovery the first miracle, but Chuck knew better. The first miracle had been finding them. The second miracle was Jason's immediate acceptance of him. The third miracle was Nesha's willingness to let him back into her life. Nesha's recovery would be the fourth miracle. But Chuck was beginning to believe that when you had love this strong, miracles weren't so unusual after all. Chapter 7. Building a Family. Love isn't just a feeling. It's 1,000 small actions that weave ordinary moments into the fabric of forever. 2 weeks had passed since Nesha's hospital discharge, and Chuck's penthouse had transformed into something he'd never imagined, a real home. Jason's workbooks covered the dining table, Nesha's medications lined the kitchen counter, and the pristine living room now held a cozy reading corner with blankets and pillows. Chuck watched from the floor-to-ceiling windows as Jason played with their new golden retriever puppy, Newton, in the rooftop garden. The name had been Jason's choice. Any family dog should honor a mathematician. He looked so happy, Nesha said, joining Chuck at the window. She moved freely now, though she still needed rest periods. He's completely different from the boy I met in the hospital, Chuck agreed. When did you last see him truly play? I can't remember, Nesha admitted sadly. He's been responsible for so long. I forgot he was still just a little boy. Chuck wrapped his arms around her from behind. He's learning to be a kid again. Yesterday I found him building pillow forts instead of solving calculus. You've been amazing with him, Chuck. You stepped into fatherhood like you were born for it. I was born for it. I just waited 5 years for the chance. Chuck, I need to ask you something. This apartment is beautiful, but it doesn't feel like us. It feels like we're guests in your life rather than building our life together. Chuck had expected this conversation. The penthouse impressed clients, but wasn't designed for families. What are you thinking? Maybe we should find a house, somewhere with a yard for Newton, where Jason can bike safely, somewhere that belongs to all three of us. Chuck smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. I've been looking at houses. Really? There's one in particular. Great school district, huge backyard, close to your old neighborhood so Jason can keep his friends. Nesha's eyes brightened. Can we see it? Today, if you're feeling up to it. Jason, Nesha called. Come inside. Dad has a surprise. Jason bounded in with Newton. What kind of surprise? The kind where we find our forever home, Chuck said. All four of us? All four of us. An hour later, they stood before a beautiful white colonial with blue shutters, surrounded by oak trees, and featuring a wraparound porch Chuck could already imagine decorating for holidays. It's perfect, Nesha breathed. The realtor led them through a spacious foyer with hardwood floors into a large living room with stone fireplace and built-in bookshelves. 5 bedrooms, the realtor explained, including a master suite and a perfect study room. Jason gravitated toward the living room immediately. Dad, look, space for all my math books and Mama's books too. And room for a piano, Chuck noted, gesturing toward an alcove. In the kitchen, Nesha ran her hands over granite countertops, already imagining family meals. Jason tested acoustics in every room, delighted by the echoes. "Can I see my room?" Jason asked. Upstairs, the realtor showed them a spacious bedroom with windows overlooking the backyard. Jason pressed his face to the glass. "There's a tree outside my window. The yard is huge. Newton will love it." Chuck and Nesha exchanged glances. They'd found home. "One more thing," the realtor said, leading them to a room with excellent lighting and built-in desks. Perfect study space. Chuck saw the potential immediately. "Jason's classroom. We could set up whiteboards for equations, shelves for mathematics books." "My own classroom?" Jason's eyes went wide. "With everything you need for advanced studies." Jason bounced with excitement. "This house is perfect. Can we live here?" Chuck looked at Nesha, who was crying happy tears. "What do you think? This is exactly what our family needs." "Then let's make an offer." The realtor smiled. "Actually, Mr. Hulbert, the seller already accepted your preliminary offer. The house is yours." "You already bought it?" Nesha asked, amazed. "Contingent on your approval," Chuck admitted. Jason launched himself at Chuck. "You're the best dad in the world." That evening, back at the penthouse, Jason sketched room layouts while Nesha made furniture lists. "Chuck," Nesha said after Jason went to bed, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "For the first time since Jason was born, I can breathe, really breathe. For 5 years I focused on just surviving each day. I never planned for the future because I wasn't sure I'd have one. And now I'm planning our bedroom, wondering about spring gardens. I'm making plans for next year and beyond, and it doesn't scare me." Chuck took her hand. "You'll be around for all those years, Nesha." "I know, and I finally believe it." "What changed?" "You, Jason, having a father who loves him unconditionally. Having a partner to share responsibilities. Feeling like part of a team instead of fighting alone." "We're going to be extraordinary," Chuck said. "The house needs work to make it perfect." "We'll make it perfect together. Jason can pick paint colors, you can design the kitchen, and I'll learn power tools to build that treehouse." Nesha laughed. "Mr. Business Executive climbing trees with hammers? I'll be whatever Jason needs." As if summoned, Jason appeared in pajamas, clutching his stuffed elephant. "I can't sleep. I keep thinking about our house." "Come here, buddy." Chuck patted the couch. Jason climbed between his parents, snuggling against both. "Dad," Jason said sleepily. "Yeah, son. Are you going to marry Mama?" The question hung in the air with childlike directness. "Would you like me to marry your mama?" Chuck asked carefully. "Yes, then we'd be a real family forever." Chuck's heart swelled with love for this remarkable child. "Then maybe I should ask her," Chuck said softly. "Right now." "Jason," Nesha laughed, "people don't usually propose in pajamas with 5-year-olds watching." "Why not?" "This seems perfect to me," Jason declared with his characteristic logic. Chuck looked at Nesha, at Jason, at the life they'd built, and realized Jason was absolutely right. "Jason, if I'm going to ask your mama to marry me, I need your permission first." Jason's face lit up with importance. "You have my permission, Dad. Definitely." Chuck turned to Nesha, taking both her hands. "Nesha Solomon, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and Jason's father for the rest of our lives?" "Yes," Nesha whispered, tears streaming. "Yes, yes, yes." Jason cheered, throwing his arms around both parents. "We're getting married. We're going to be a real family." Chuck held his fiancée and son close, understanding this imperfect, spontaneous moment was exactly the proposal their family deserved. They were already real. They'd always been real. Now they were making it official. Chapter 8. Love's Second Chance. True love doesn't get a second chance. It simply finds its way back to where it always belonged. 6 weeks had passed since Chuck's impromptu proposal in his penthouse living room, and their new house had transformed into a home filled with laughter, learning, and the comfortable chaos of family life. Nesha's health improved with each passing day, her energy returning alongside the color in her cheeks. Jason had settled into his new routine of advanced tutoring in the mornings and regular childhood activities in the afternoons, finally balancing his extraordinary intellect with his need to simply be a 6-year-old boy. Chuck stood in the hospital garden where he had arranged something special for Nesha, hands trembling slightly with nervousness despite her previous acceptance of his proposal. Today was different, though. Today was about recreating the magic they had lost and celebrating the love that had survived 5 years of separation. "Dad, are you sure Mama can't see us from her hospital room?" Jason whispered conspiratorially, adjusting the small bouquet of daisies he held. "She's having her routine checkup with Dr. Williams," Chuck assured his son. "She won't finish for another 30 minutes, giving us plenty of time to set everything up perfectly." Jason surveyed the scene Chuck had created with the enthusiasm of someone deeply invested in his parents' love story. A small table had been positioned under the same oak tree where Chuck and Nesha used to study during college. A tree Chuck had specifically requested be transplanted to the hospital garden as part of his latest donation. The table was covered with white cloth and set with the same blue plates they had used for their very first date at the little Italian restaurant near campus. "This looks exactly like the pictures you showed me from college," Jason observed with satisfaction. "Mama is going to love it." Chuck had spent hours sharing stories with Jason about his relationship with Nesha, wanting his son to understand the depth of history between his parents. Jason had listened to every story with the fascination of someone discovering a fairy tale that happened to be real. "Do you remember what your job is?" Chuck asked, kneeling down to straighten Jason's little bow tie. "I'm supposed to bring Mama here by telling her you want to show her something special in the garden. Then I'm supposed to give her the flowers and tell her that you wanted to recreate your first date because you never got to have a proper last date. Perfect. And then I'm supposed to go sit on the bench over there and be very quiet while you and Mama have your romantic dinner, but I can watch to make sure everything goes okay." Chuck smiled at Jason's serious approach to his role as matchmaker. The boy had taken his parents' engagement as a personal project, frequently offering suggestions for their wedding plans and asking detailed questions about the logistics of romance. "And if she cries?" Chuck asked, testing Jason's preparation. "Happy tears are okay, but sad tears mean I should come over and help fix whatever went wrong. You're going to be an excellent wingman, son." "What's a wingman?" "Someone who helps make sure everything goes perfectly for the people he loves." Jason beamed with pride at this definition. "I'm really good at making things perfect for people I love." Chuck's throat tightened with emotion at the simple truth of Jason's statement. This remarkable child had spent his entire life trying to make things perfect for his mother, and now he had extended that same generous spirit to include Chuck. A member of the hospital catering staff approached with covered dishes, and Chuck directed the final touches of their recreated first date. The menu was identical to what they had shared 7 years ago: Caesar salad, chicken marsala, and tiramisu for dessert. Chuck had even managed to find the same brand of sparkling cider they had drunk as cash-strapped college students who couldn't afford wine. "Mr. Chuck," Jason said thoughtfully, "can I ask you something important?" "Always." "When you and Mama get married, will I still be able to call you Dad? Or do I have to wait until it's official?" Chuck felt his heart constrict with love for this child who worried about such details. "Jason, you're my son whether there's a wedding or not. You've been my son since the moment I met you in that hospital waiting room. The wedding is just a party to celebrate what's already true." "Good, because I really like having a dad. and I don't want to have to give it back. You never have to give it back. I'm your dad forever, no matter what. Jason nodded with satisfaction, then suddenly straightened with the alertness of someone who had spotted his target. Dad, Mama's coming. She's walking with Dr. Williams toward the garden entrance. Chuck felt his pulse quicken as he saw Nisha approaching, deep in conversation with her oncologist. She was wearing the blue sundress Chuck had bought her the week before, and her hair had grown back enough to curl softly around her face. She looked healthy, vibrant, and more beautiful than ever. Jason, showtime, Chuck whispered. Jason straightened his shoulders and walked toward his mother with the purposeful stride of someone on an important mission. Chuck watched from behind the oak tree as Jason approached Nisha and Dr. Williams. Mama, Jason called out cheerfully. Dad wants to show you something really special in the garden. He said it's a surprise that will make you smile. Chuck saw Nisha's face light up with curiosity and affection as she looked down at her son. What kind of surprise? The best kind. The kind that shows how much he loves you. Dr. Williams smiled at Jason's earnestness. Well, that sounds like something worth seeing. Your test results were excellent today, Nisha. I think a romantic surprise is exactly what the doctor ordered. Really? Everything still looks good? Better than good. Your latest blood work shows no trace of cancer cells. If these results continue for another 6 months, we'll officially be able to use the word remission. Chuck saw Nisha's knees buckle slightly with relief, and Jason immediately moved to steady her with the quick reflexes of someone who had been monitoring his mother's physical state for years. I'm okay, Nisha assured them both. It's good news, really good news. The best news, Doctor. Williams agreed. Now go see what that wonderful man of yours has planned for you. Jason took his mother's hand and led her toward the oak tree, chattering excitedly about how beautiful the garden looked today and how Newton had learned a new trick that morning. Chuck stepped out from behind the tree as they approached, and he saw Nisha's expression change from curiosity to wonder to tears of joy as she took in the scene he had created. Chuck, she breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. This is exactly like our first date, he finished softly. Down to the blue plates and the sparkling cider we couldn't afford to replace with champagne. Jason presented his mother with the bouquet of daisies with the formality of someone performing a sacred ritual. Dad wanted me to tell you that he wanted to recreate your first date because you never got to have a proper last date. Nisha accepted the flowers with trembling hands, her eyes never leaving Chuck's face. You remembered everything. I remembered every moment of our time together. Every conversation, every laugh, every dream we shared. I've been carrying all of it with me for 5 years. Chuck guided Nisha to her chair, and Jason immediately scampered over to his designated observation post on the nearby bench, watching his parents with the intense focus of someone invested in a successful outcome. I can't believe you did all this, Nisha said, looking around at the perfect recreation of their college romance. The tree, the table, even the food. I wanted to give us something we never had the chance to do, Chuck explained, sitting across from her. We never got to have a proper goodbye dinner, never got to celebrate our engagement properly, never got to sit together and talk about our future without the weight of illness and fear hanging over us. And now? Now we get to have all of those conversations. We get to plan our wedding, talk about where we want to travel together, decide how many more children we want to have. More children? Nisha's eyes widened with surprise and hope. If you want them, Jason has been asking about whether he's going to have brothers and sisters. Apparently, he's very interested in having siblings who might appreciate mathematics as much as he does. Nisha laughed, the sound pure and joyful in a way Chuck hadn't heard since their college days. He's been asking me the same thing. I wasn't sure how you felt about expanding our family. Nesha, I want everything with you. Every experience we missed, every dream we put on hold, every possibility we were too scared to imagine. I want to give Jason siblings, and I want to watch you be pregnant without being terrified about your health. I want to coach little league teams and attend school plays and argue about curfews when they're teenagers. That sounds like a beautiful life. It sounds like the life we were supposed to have 7 years ago. Chuck reached across the table and took Nesha's hands in his, noting with gratitude how strong and warm they felt. Nesha, I know I already proposed and I know you already said yes, but I want to ask you again, properly this time. Chuck stood up and moved around the table, kneeling beside Nesha's chair as Jason watched from his bench with barely contained excitement. Chuck pulled out a small velvet box that contained the same engagement ring he had bought 7 years ago. The ring he had kept in his desk drawer for 5 years, unable to return it and unwilling to give up hope. Nesha Solomon, you are the love of my life, the mother of my brilliant son, and the strongest woman I have ever known. You saved Jason by being an extraordinary mother. You saved me by teaching me what really matters in life. Now let me save you by loving you for the rest of our lives. Chuck opened the box, revealing the vintage sapphire ring surrounded by diamonds that he had chosen because the blue stones matched Nesha's favorite dress. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband, Jason's father, and the man who gets to wake up next to you for the next 50 years? Nesha was crying openly now, but Chuck could see they were the happy tears Jason had deemed acceptable. Yes, Chuck. Yes to all of it. Yes to the next 50 years and everything they bring. Chuck slipped the ring onto Nesha's finger, noting with satisfaction that it fit perfectly despite the weight she had lost during her illness. As he stood and kissed his fiancée, he heard Jason cheering from his bench. "They're getting married!" Jason announced to anyone within earshot. "My mum and dad are getting married, and we're going to be the best family ever." Chuck and Nesha broke apart, laughing at Jason's enthusiasm. Chuck gestured for Jason to join them at the table, and the boy practically bounced over to examine his mother's engagement ring. "It's perfect, Mama," Jason declared with the authority of someone who understood the importance of precision. "It matches your eyes when you're really happy." "When am I really happy?" Nesha asked, curious about her son's observation. "Right now," Jason said simply, "and when Dad reads to me at bedtime, and when we all cook dinner together, and when Newton does his tricks. Your eyes get this special blue color when everything is perfect." Chuck marveled at Jason's emotional intelligence, his ability to notice and articulate the subtle details of his mother's happiness. This child had spent so much time monitoring Nesha's well-being that he had become an expert at reading her moods and health. "Speaking of perfect," Chuck said, "there's something else I want to talk to both of you about." "More surprises?" Jason asked hopefully. "One more? About our wedding." "Are we going to have a big wedding?" Nesha asked. "Because honestly, Chuck, after everything we've been through, I'd be happy getting married in the hospital chapel with just Jason and Dr. Williams as witnesses." "Actually, that's exactly what I was thinking. Not necessarily the hospital chapel, but something small and intimate. Just the people who matter most to us." "I want to be in the wedding," Jason announced. "Can I carry the rings? I'm really good at not dropping important things." "Jason, I was hoping you would be my best man," Chuck said seriously. Jason's eyes went wide with amazement. "Really? I can be your best man? Really? You're the most important person in my life besides your mother. I can't imagine getting married without you standing beside me. This is going to be the best wedding ever," Jason declared with certainty. "When are we doing it?" Chuck looked at Nesha, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her expression. "What do you think about next month? As soon as Dr. Williams clears you for travel, we could have a small ceremony somewhere special." "Where were you thinking?" Actually, I was thinking about the place where we first fell in love. Northwestern has a beautiful chapel on campus, and the gardens where we used to study are gorgeous in the fall. Nesha's face lit up with joy. A wedding at Northwestern? With the oak trees and the library where we spent so many hours together. And Jason can see where his parents met and fell in love, Chuck added. I want to see everything, Jason said excitedly. I want to see your old dorm rooms and the cafeteria where you ate together and the place where Dad first told you he loved you. Chuck and Nesha exchanged glances, both of them amazed by Jason's interest in their history and his desire to understand every detail of their love story. Then that's what we'll do, Nesha said firmly. A small wedding at Northwestern, with Jason as Chuck's best man and Dr. Williams as my maid of honor, since she's the one who helped save my life. And Newton? Jason asked. Can Newton come to the wedding too? Newton can definitely come to the wedding, Chuck assured him, as they shared their recreated first-date dinner under the transplanted oak tree, with Jason providing running commentary on how romantic everything looked and how happy his parents seemed. Chuck realized that this was better than any of the grand gestures he had planned during their college years. This was real. This was family. This was love that had survived separation, illness, fear, and 5 years of wondering what might have been. Now they knew. What might have been was exactly this. A family sitting together in a hospital garden, planning their future and celebrating their second chance at forever. Dad, Jason said as they finished their tiramisu. Yes, son. I'm really glad you gave Mama your blood that day. Why's that? Because that's when our family started. That's when everything became perfect. Chuck looked at Nesha, at Jason, at the ring sparkling on his fiancée's finger, and realized that Jason was absolutely right. Everything was perfect. Finally, everything was exactly as it should be. Chapter 9. The Recovery. Sometimes healing isn't just about the body returning to health. It's about the soul remembering how to hope for tomorrow. 3 months had passed since Chuck's romantic proposal, and the word everyone feared to speak had finally become reality: remission. Dr. Williams delivered the news on a crisp October morning, her professional demeanor breaking into a smile that matched the family's joy. The latest tests show no detectable cancer cells, Dr. Williams announced, setting down Nesha's file with satisfaction. Nesha, you are officially in complete remission. Jason, now 6 and even more remarkable, immediately began calculating the statistical significance while Chuck and Nesha held each other, crying tears of relief. Dr. Williams, Jason asked with characteristic directness, what are the chances Mama will stay healthy? With continued monitoring and your father's excellent care team, the prognosis is very good, Jason. Your mother has beaten this disease. Now, standing in their kitchen while Nesha hummed preparing Jason's school lunch, Chuck marveled at how normal their life had become. Medication schedules and doctor visits had been replaced by beautiful family chaos. Homework arguments, screen time negotiations, and Newton's constant protective presence. Dad, can you help with my math project? Jason called from the dining room, materials spread with organized precision. What kind of project? Chuck asked, joining him. I'm supposed to show how mathematics applies to real life, Jason explained, gesturing toward poster boards covered with equations. I decided to calculate the probability of our family being together. Chuck felt his throat tighten as he examined Jason's work. The boy had created a complex model, factoring Chuck having the correct blood type, being at the hospital that specific day, and Nesha's successful recovery. According to my calculations, Jason continued seriously, the probability of everything happening exactly as it did is approximately 0.0003%. Our family existing was basically a mathematical miracle. That's incredible work, Jason, Chuck said, genuinely impressed. What conclusion did you draw? That some things are more important than statistics, Jason replied with wisdom beyond his years. Love doesn't follow mathematical rules, even though everything else does. Nesha appeared in the doorway, cheeks flushed from kitchen warmth, eyes bright with returned health. "What are my favorite mathematicians working on?" she asked, settling beside Jason. "Jason calculated the probability of our family existing," Chuck explained. "Apparently we're statistically impossible." "The best things usually are," Nesha said, ruffling Jason's hair with casual affection of someone no longer conserving energy for survival. Chuck watched this simple interaction, noting how different it was from their early days. Nesha no longer moved with careful precision. Jason no longer watched his mother with constant vigilance. They had both learned to relax into normal family life. "Speaking of statistical impossibilities," Chuck said, "we need to finalize wedding details for next week." "I can't believe it's finally happening," Nesha said, excitement replacing the anxiety that had marked earlier conversations about the future. 3 weeks ago, I was still too nervous to make definitive plans. "And now?" Chuck asked, though he could see the answer in her expression. "Now I'm planning what to plant in our spring garden, wondering whether Jason will choose piano or soccer lessons, and thinking about whether our second child will be as mathematically gifted." "Second child?" Jason looked up with immediate interest. "Are you having another baby?" Chuck and Nesha exchanged glances, smiling at Jason's directness. They had been discussing expanding their family privately. "We're thinking about it," Nesha said carefully. "How would you feel about being a big brother?" Jason considered this with usual thoroughness. "I think I'd be good at it. I'm already good at taking care of people, and I could teach the baby about numbers. But will you still have time for me?" Chuck knelt beside Jason's chair. "Nothing will ever change how much we love you. You were our first miracle, and you'll always be the most important person in our family. But a baby would be important too, right?" "Very important, but different important, not more important." Jason nodded, accepting this explanation with trust he'd learned to place in his parents' promises. "Okay, then I think we should have a baby. But maybe wait until after the wedding so you can focus on getting married properly." Chuck and Nesha burst into laughter at Jason's practical family planning approach. "That sounds like sensible advice," Nesha agreed. "Wedding first, then baby planning." "Good. Now can you help me finish my project? I want to add a section about the probability of our family getting even bigger." As Chuck helped Jason work through statistical complexities of sibling addition, he reflected on how their lives had changed since that hospital day. Jason had grown not just physically, but in confidence, his intelligence now supported by security of knowing his family was stable. The boy still excelled academically, but had also learned to play, to be silly, to act his age. More importantly, Jason had learned to trust that adults would handle serious responsibilities, freeing him to focus on 6-year-old concerns. Whether Newton preferred tennis balls or rope toys, which superhero was strongest, and why homework existed when he already understood everything. "Dad," Jason said, interrupting Chuck's thoughts, "Mrs. Patterson says I might skip a grade next year. What do you think?" Chuck considered carefully. Jason's teacher had discussed this possibility for weeks, noting the boy worked several grade levels ahead in every subject. "What do you think, Jason? Would you want to skip ahead?" "I don't know. The work would be more interesting, but I like my friends. And if I skip too many grades, I might graduate high school really young, then what?" Chuck was struck by Jason's mature consideration of long-term implications. Most children would focus on immediate excitement, but Jason was thinking about social and practical consequences. "What if we found ways to give you more challenging work without skipping grades? Advanced tutoring, or maybe university programs where you could take math classes with older students?" Jason's face lit up. "Really? I could take real university classes, if that's what you want, and if you're academically ready." "That sounds perfect. Then I could stay with my friends but still learn new things." Nesha smiled at Chuck, both pleased with their son's balanced approach to his exceptional abilities. "Speaking of university," Nesha said, "have you heard back from Northwestern about the chapel?" "Everything's confirmed. Chapel reserved for Saturday afternoon, reception in the faculty garden where we studied. Photographer meeting us at library steps for pictures where we fell in love. This will be the most romantic wedding ever," Jason declared with authority of someone closely monitoring the planning. "And Newton will look handsome in his bow tie." Chuck had initially been skeptical about Jason's insistence that Newton participate, but had been won over by his son's argument that the dog was as much family as anyone. "Have you finished your best man speech?" Nesha asked Jason teasingly. "Yes. Do you want to hear it?" "I want to be surprised at the wedding," Chuck said quickly, knowing Jason's speech would likely reduce him to happy tears. "Okay. But I think you'll really like it. I talked about mathematical miracles and how love is the most important equation." Chuck felt his eyes getting misty just from Jason's description. This remarkable child had not only accepted Chuck as his father, but had embraced bringing their family together. The phone rang, interrupting their planning. Chuck answered to find Dr. Williams calling. "Chuck, I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted to share additional good news about Nesha's latest results." "What kind of good news?" Chuck asked, gesturing for Nesha to join him. "The genetic markers we've been monitoring show Nesha's recovery is even more complete than initially thought. Her immune system has developed robust response that suggests excellent long-term prognosis." Chuck felt relief wash over him, even though he hadn't realized he was still carrying worry. "What does that mean practically?" "Nesha can live completely normally. No restrictions on travel, physical activity, or future pregnancies if you decide to expand your family." Chuck looked at Nesha, seeing tears of joy as she listened. "Dr. Williams, I don't know how to thank you. Seeing patients like Nesha recover completely is all the thanks I need. Enjoy your wedding, Chuck. You've all earned your happy ending." After hanging up, the three of them stood in their kitchen, absorbing the magnitude of what they'd learned. Nesha was completely healthy. Their future was no longer shadowed by illness returning. "Mama," Jason said softly, "does this mean you're never going to be sick again?" "It means I'm going to be healthy for a very long time, sweetheart, long enough to see you grow up, go to college, maybe get married someday." Jason threw his arms around both parents with exuberance of someone who understood this news meant his family was truly safe. "This is the best day ever," Jason declared. "Even better than meeting Dad, because now I know we'll be together forever." Chuck held his fiancée and son close, feeling fear and uncertainty finally lift completely. They had survived separation, illness, and years of loneliness. They had found each other again, built a family, and created love strong enough to overcome every obstacle. Now they were going to have their wedding, their future, and the lifetime together they had always been meant to share. "Forever and ever," Chuck agreed, knowing that for the first time since that restaurant night 7 years ago, he could make that promise without reservations. Their mathematical miracle was complete. Chapter 10. Forever Begins. Love stories don't end with happily ever after. They begin there, in the quiet moments when two hearts choose each other again and again, day after ordinary day. The Northwestern University chapel glowed with autumn sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the stone floor where Chuck waited for his bride. 6 months ago, he had been a successful but lonely businessman. Today, he was about to become a husband and officially embrace the fatherhood he had always been meant to claim. Jason stood beside Chuck at the altar, resplendent in his miniature tuxedo and holding the wedding rings with careful precision. Newton sat at Jason's feet, remarkably well-behaved in his formal bow tie, understanding the significance of the occasion. "Dad," Jason whispered, "are you nervous?" "A little," Chuck admitted, adjusting his tie for the third time in 5 minutes. "Don't be. Mama loves you more than anything in the whole world. She told me so yesterday." Chuck smiled at his son's matter-of-fact reassurance. Jason had taken his role as best man seriously, providing not just ceremonial duties but emotional support for both parents during the wedding week. The small gathering included Dr. Williams as Nesha's maid of honor, Mrs. Rodriguez from the bakery, who had been like a grandmother to Jason, several of Chuck's business associates who had become genuine friends, and Professor Martin, their favorite mathematics professor from college days. "She said yes when you proposed in pajamas," Jason continued with 6-year-old logic. "She's definitely going to say yes in a fancy suit in a beautiful chapel." The chapel doors opened, and Chuck's breath caught as Nesha appeared in a simple but elegant ivory dress that complemented her glowing health and radiant happiness. She carried daisies, the same flowers from their recreated first date, and her hair was adorned with baby's breath that caught the light like scattered stars. What took Chuck's breath away wasn't her beauty, but the expression on her face, pure joy, complete confidence, and absolute love. This was a woman no longer afraid of the future, no longer carrying the weight of uncertainty. Dr. Williams walked beside Nesha, beaming with pride at seeing her patient not just healthy, but radiantly happy. As Nesha reached the altar, Chuck stepped forward to take her hand, and the small congregation rose. Jason, without prompting, moved to stand between his parents, completing their family circle. "Dearly beloved," the chaplain began, "we gather today to witness the marriage of Chuck Halbert and Nesha Solomon, and to celebrate the family they have created together." Chuck looked down at Jason, who watched with rapt attention, occasionally glancing at Newton to ensure good behavior. This remarkable child had brought them together and now stood as living proof of love that had survived every obstacle. Chuck and Nesha have written their own vows, and they have asked their son Jason to participate as well. Chuck turned to face Nesha fully, taking both her hands. "Nesha, 7 years ago I fell in love with a brilliant, beautiful woman who challenged me to be better than I thought possible. 5 years ago, I lost that woman and thought I had lost my chance at the life we were meant to share." Chuck's voice grew stronger. "6 months ago, I found you again and discovered that our love had not only survived, but had created the most extraordinary gift, our son Jason. Today I'm marrying the woman who raised our son with wisdom and courage, who fought a terrible disease with grace, and who taught me that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice we make every day." Chuck paused, looking at Jason before returning his gaze to Nesha. "I choose you, Nesha. I choose our family. I choose our future together. I promise to love you in sickness and in health, to be the father Jason deserves and the husband you need. I promise to never let fear or circumstance separate us again." Nesha was crying openly now, but her smile was radiant. "Chuck, when I left you 7 years ago, I thought I was protecting you from a future filled with illness and uncertainty. I was wrong. I wasn't protecting you. I was denying both of us the chance to face life's challenges together, as partners." She squeezed his hands, her voice growing stronger. "You taught me that love isn't about perfect circumstances or guaranteed outcomes. It's about choosing to trust someone with your whole heart, even when you're afraid. You didn't just accept Jason as your son. You embraced him completely, giving him the father he had always deserved." Her voice broke with emotion. "I choose you, Chuck. I choose the life we're building together. I promise to trust you with my fears and my dreams, to be your partner in raising Jason and any other children we're blessed with. I promise to never run away again, no matter what challenges we face." The chaplain smiled. "Jason, your parents have asked you to share some words as well." Jason stepped forward, his young voice clear and confident. Mom and Dad, I calculated the mathematical probability of our family being together, and it's basically impossible. But love doesn't follow math rules, even though everything else does. The congregation chuckled at Jason's unique perspective, while Chuck and Nesha exchanged amazed glances. Dad, you saved Mom's life with your blood, but you saved my life by being my father. You taught me that being smart is good, but being kind is better. Mom, you're the bravest person I know. You taught me that being afraid is okay, as long as you don't let fear stop you from doing what's right. Jason looked at both his parents with remarkable seriousness. I promise to be the best son I can be, to help take care of our family, and to always remember that love is the most important equation of all. There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel as Jason finished. Chuck felt his heart overflow with pride and love for this extraordinary child. The rings, please, the chaplain requested. Jason carefully handed over the wedding bands, each engraved with, "Forever begins today." Chuck slipped the ring onto Nesha's finger with trembling hands, while she did the same for him, both marveling at the simple gold bands that symbolized their commitment. By the power vested in me by Northwestern University and the state of Illinois, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Chuck, you may kiss your bride. Chuck cupped Nesha's face in his hands, looking into her eyes one last time as her fiancé. I love you, Mrs. Halbert. I love you too, Mr. Halbert. Their kiss was gentle, reverent, and filled with the promise of all the years they would share together. As they broke apart, Jason cheered with delight, and Newton barked his approval, causing the congregation to burst into laughter and applause. Ladies and gentlemen, the chaplain announced with a smile, I present to you the Halbert family. The reception in the faculty garden was exactly what Chuck and Nesha had envisioned, intimate, joyful, and filled with people who had supported their journey. The same oak trees where they had studied as college students provided shade for tables decorated with simple daisies. Jason had appointed himself unofficial host, moving between tables to ensure everyone knew their reunion story. Chuck watched with amusement as his son explained statistical probability to Professor Martin, who listened with fascination. He's going to be quite the mathematician someday, Professor Martin told Chuck. I've never seen a 6-year-old who understands probability theory at that level. We're exploring advanced programs while letting him be a child, Chuck replied proudly. Dr. Williams approached with champagne, beaming with satisfaction. Chuck, seeing Nesha today is the best wedding gift I could have asked for. 6 months ago, I was worried about her prognosis. Today, she's glowing with health and happiness. We owe you everything, Dr. Williams. Without your love and support, the best medical care wouldn't have been enough, Dr. Williams said gently. Nesha's recovery was as much about hope and love as treatment. Chuck looked across the garden to where Nesha was dancing with Jason to soft jazz music. His wife was laughing at something Jason had said, her face radiant with happiness that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. Excuse me, Chuck said, but I believe I owe my wife a dance. Chuck approached and tapped Jason on the shoulder. May I cut in, son? Only if you promise to dance with me next, Jason replied with a grin. Chuck took Nesha in his arms, and they swayed together, surrounded by golden afternoon light and the warmth of family and friends. How does it feel to be Mrs. Halbert? Chuck asked. It feels like coming home, Nesha replied without hesitation, like everything before was just preparation for this moment. Any regrets about the years we lost? Nesha considered seriously. No regrets. Those years made Jason who he is today, brilliant, compassionate, resilient. They made me appreciate health and happiness in ways I never could have before. And they made you successful enough to give our family every advantage. So you think everything happened exactly as it was supposed to? I think we found our way back to each other when we were ready to build the life we were always meant to have. As the song ended, Jason appeared, ready to claim his promised dance. Chuck watched as Nesha swept their son around the dance floor, both laughing with pure joy. Newton trotted alongside them, his bow tie slightly askew, but his tail wagging with happiness. As evening approached, Chuck found himself collecting moments like treasures. Jason's serious expression cutting wedding cake for Newton. Nesha's laughter as Professor Martin told college stories, Dr. Williams wiping away tears during Jason's impromptu speech about mathematical miracles. The sun was setting when the party began to wind down. Jason had fallen asleep in Chuck's arms, exhausted but unwilling to miss a moment. Newton lay at Nesha's feet, his bow tie crooked, but his devotion unwavering. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Hulbert?" Chuck asked softly. "More than ready, Mr. Hulbert." The drive home was quiet, with Jason sleeping peacefully and Newton curled beside him. Nesha held Chuck's hand as he drove, her wedding ring catching light from street lamps. "Chuck," she said softly, "thank you." "For what?" "For finding us, for saving us, for giving Jason a father and me a partner, for proving that love really can overcome anything. Thank you for letting me be part of your family, for trusting me with Jason's heart and your future." They pulled into their driveway, their home, where Newton's toys scattered the lawn, and Jason's bicycle leaned against the garage, and Nisha's herb garden thrived in the backyard. Chuck carried sleeping Jason inside, while Nesha followed with Newton, both moving with quiet efficiency of parents who had learned to work as a team. They tucked Jason into bed, carefully removing his tuxedo and leaving him peaceful in sleep. "Sweet dreams, my brilliant boy," Nesha whispered, kissing Jason's forehead. "Sleep well, son," Chuck added, adjusting blankets around their sleeping child. In their own bedroom, they helped each other out of wedding attire with tenderness of people who knew they had the rest of their lives to love each other. "I can't believe we're actually married," Nesha said, hanging her dress carefully beside Chuck's tuxedo. "I can't believe I almost lost you forever. But you didn't. We found our way back to each other, and now we have everything we ever dreamed of." Chuck pulled Nesha close, marveling at how perfectly she fit in his arms. How right it felt to hold her without shadows of fear or uncertainty. "What do you want to do tomorrow?" he asked. "Sleep late, have pancakes with Jason, maybe start planning that vegetable garden, play with Newton in the backyard, read the Sunday paper together like a normal married couple." "That sounds perfect." "What about next year? 5 years from now? 10 years? Chuck considered all the possibilities stretching ahead. "I want to watch Jason grow up and discover his gifts. I want to travel with you to places we dreamed about in college. I want to give Jason siblings who adore him. I want to grow old with you, knowing that every day together is a gift." "I want all of that too," Nesha said softly. "But mostly, I just want to wake up every morning knowing that our family is safe and loved and together." "Forever and ever," Chuck promised. "Forever and ever," Nesha agreed. Outside their window, snow began to fall softly, dusting their neighborhood with winter's first hint. But inside their home, wrapped in each other's arms, Chuck and Nesha felt only warmth and love and unshakable certainty that they had finally found their way to exactly where they belonged. Down the hall, Jason slept peacefully, his dreams filled with mathematical equations that solved for love, statistical models that proved miracles were possible, and absolute certainty that his family would be together forever. In the living room, Newton dozed by the fireplace, guardian of a family that had found each other against all odds and chosen to build a life based on love, hope, and the simple truth that some bonds are stronger than any force that tries to break them. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, new joys. There would be homework help, piano lessons, doctor appointments, and business meetings. There would be the beautiful, ordinary chaos of family life, breakfast conversations and bedtime stories, scraped knees and proud moments. But tonight, the Halbert family was complete, healthy, and home. Their love story had survived separation, illness, fear, and 5 years of wondering what might have been. What might have been was exactly this: a family united by love, strengthened by adversity, and committed to facing whatever the future might bring together. In the master bedroom, Chuck and Nesha lay entwined, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns in her hair just like their college days. But this time was different. No secrets, no fear of tomorrow, no uncertainty about their future. "Do you hear that?" Nesha whispered. Chuck listened. From Jason's room came soft sounds of the boy talking to Newton, probably explaining mathematical concepts. From outside, gentle whisper of snow falling. From within their hearts, steady rhythm of contentment. "I hear home," Chuck said softly. "I hear our family." "I love the sound of our family," Nesha agreed. Jason's voice drifted to them. "Newton, did you know that the probability of finding your family when you thought you'd lost them forever is actually much higher than most people think? Dad taught me that love doesn't follow regular math rules. It follows miracle math." Chuck and Nesha smiled in the darkness. "Miracle math," Chuck repeated softly. "I like that." "That's what we are," Nesha said. "A family that exists because of miracle math." As they drifted off to sleep, Chuck thought about the journey that had brought them here. 6 months ago, he had been a man who had everything money could buy, but nothing money couldn't replace. Tonight, he was the richest man in the world, not because of his bank account, but because of the woman sleeping in his arms and the brilliant, loving boy dreaming down the hall. Love had found a way. Love always found a way. Forever had finally begun.